The rain hammered against the windows of the sprawling estate like 1,000 desperate fingers seeking shelter. Marcus Wellington stood in the marble foyer of his childhood home, water dripping from his Armani coat onto floors that had once echoed with laughter. He'd avoided this place for 15 years, ever since his mother's funeral, letting it sit empty, while he built his empire across 3 continents. Now, at 42, with more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, he'd finally returned to sign the papers that would transform the mansion into luxury condos. But the moment he pushed open the heavy oak door, he knew something was terribly wrong. The house wasn't empty. Somewhere deeper inside, a child was crying. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. His first thought was to call the police, but something stopped him. The crying wasn't frantic or terrified. It was the exhausted, hiccuping sob of a child who had been crying for a very long time. Against every instinct honed by years of ruthless business dealings, he moved toward the sound. What he found in the old conservatory shattered every assumption he'd made about his perfectly ordered world. A young woman sat on a moth-eaten blanket spread across the dusty floor, her arms wrapped around 2 small children. She couldn't have been older than 28, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible choices. The little girl pressed against her side looked about 6, her tear-stained face buried in her mother's shoulder. A boy, maybe 4, clutched a tattered stuffed elephant while his small body shook with silent sobs. The woman's head snapped up when she heard his footsteps. Terror flashed across her face, the raw, animal fear of a mother protecting her young. She scrambled to her feet, positioning herself between Marcus and the children. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't call the police. We'll leave right now. Just give us 10 minutes, please." Marcus stood motionless, his prepared speech about trespassing dying on his lips. In the fading afternoon light filtering through grimy windows, he could see the makeshift camp they'd created. A small camping stove, a few canned goods lined up with military precision, clothes folded neatly in grocery bags. Despite the obvious poverty, everything was clean and organized. These weren't drug addicts or criminals. This was a family trying to survive. "How long have you been here?" he asked quietly. The woman's chin lifted slightly, a flash of defiance mixing with her fear. 3 weeks. I know it's wrong. I know we're trespassing. But I lost my job at the diner when my daughter got sick, and we were living in my car, and it was getting so cold at night. And I saw this place was empty, and her voice broke. I just needed my babies to be warm. Marcus had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching. He'd faced down corporate raiders and hostile takeovers with ice in his veins. But this woman's desperate courage hit him like a physical blow. He saw his mother in her, the way she'd worked 3 jobs after his father left, the way she'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities she'd never had. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked, surprised by the question. Sarah Chen. This is Emma and this is Tyler." The little girl peeked out from behind her mother, curiosity momentarily overcoming fear. Tyler just stared at Marcus with huge, solemn eyes that had seen far too much for someone so small. Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his board of directors and baffled his accountants. "It's going to storm tonight." "Really storm? You can't leave in this weather." Sarah's eyes widened. "We'll go first thing in the morning." "I promise." "The heat doesn't work in this part of the house," Marcus continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "The bedrooms upstairs still have working radiators. Second door on the left has twin beds. Third door has a queen. Bathroom between them should have hot water." He watched the disbelief wash over her face, followed by suspicion, then desperate hope. "I don't understand. Why are you—" "My mother used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when no one would ever know." He looked at the children, both staring at him now with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Someone should know that you kept your children safe, that you stayed strong when everything fell apart. That matters." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "Thank you." Marcus nodded stiffly and turned to leave, but Tyler's small voice stopped him. "Are you going to stay too?" He turned back to find the little boy watching him with an expression far too knowing for his age. I have a hotel." "Hotels are lonely," Tyler said with the simple wisdom of a child. Mama says lonely is worse than hungry sometimes. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. When was the last time he'd felt anything but lonely? His penthouse apartment in Manhattan was 5,000 square feet of emptiness. His beach house in the Hamptons echoed with silence. He traveled constantly, worked obsessively, and called it success. Maybe just for tonight, he heard himself say. This old house shouldn't sit completely empty. That night became 3 nights. 3 nights became a week. Marcus found himself stopping by the mansion every evening after work. Initially telling himself he was just checking on the property, but truthfully he was drawn by the sounds that now filled the once silent halls. Emma's laughter as she played pretend tea party with her stuffed animals, Tyler's endless questions about how everything worked, Sarah's soft singing as she cooked simple meals on the camping stove. He started bringing things, casually, as if they'd just been lying around. A space heater that was sitting in storage, groceries, that would just go to waste otherwise, toys. From a donation bin at the office. Each time, Sarah's eyes would fill with tears she tried to hide, her thank yous barely audible. But Marcus was getting something more valuable than he was giving. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something real. Sarah would tell him about her day with the kids while he helped her carry supplies upstairs. Emma would show him the drawings she'd made, explaining each crayon stroke with intense seriousness. Tyler appointed himself Marcus's helper and would follow him around, chattering about dinosaurs and superheroes. One evening, Marcus arrived to find Sarah crying quietly in the conservatory while the children slept upstairs. She'd just received a call from the school district, without a permanent address. Emma couldn't enroll for the spring semester. The weight of her failure seemed to press down on her shoulders. I'm doing everything wrong, she whispered. I'm supposed to protect them, give them stability. And instead I'm squatting in a stranger's mansion like some kind of criminal. What kind of mother am I? Marcus sat down beside her on the dusty floor. Something his assistant would have found absolutely incomprehensible. You're the kind of mother who chose to keep her children safe and warm, instead of preserving her pride. The kind who makes them feel loved even when you have nothing. The kind who keeps going even when everything's falling apart. He paused. You're the kind of mother I had. She would have liked you. Sarah looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Tell me about her. And Marcus did. For the first time in 15 years, he talked about his mother, her strength, her sacrifice, her absolute unwavering belief that he could be more than his circumstances. He talked about the empty mansion, how he'd bought it back after making his fortune but could never bring himself to live in it because the memories hurt too much. He talked about success that felt hollow and achievements that meant nothing because there was no one to share them with. When he finally fell silent, Sarah said softly, She'd be proud of you. Not because of the money, because you chose kindness when you could have chosen cruelty. That's the hardest choice there is. The next morning, Marcus called his lawyer and his real estate agent. He canceled the condo development deal, a decision that cost him $12 million in projected revenue. Then he made several other calls that would have seemed absolutely insane to anyone who knew him. When Sarah came downstairs that afternoon, Marcus was waiting in the foyer with Emma and Tyler, who were both bouncing with barely contained excitement. What's going on? Sarah asked warily. Marcus handed her an envelope. The deed to the house. It's yours. Free and clear. Sarah stared at the papers as if they might disappear. What? No, I can't. This is no. There's more, Marcus continued. I've established a trust fund for Emma and Tyler's education. College, graduate school, whatever they want. And I've partnered with a local nonprofit to convert the West Wing into a transitional housing facility for families experiencing homelessness. We're calling it the Grace Wellington Center after my mother. I'd like you to manage it, if you're interested. The salary is competitive, and you'd have real health insurance for the first time in years. Sarah's legs seemed to give out. She sat down hard on the marble steps, the papers fluttering in her shaking hands. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Marcus knelt down so he was at her eye level. Because you and your children reminded me what my mother spent her whole life teaching me, that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the lives we touch, the kindness we show. The humanity we preserve when the world tells us to look away. He smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile he'd made in years. You didn't see a billionaire or a business opportunity when you found this house. You saw shelter for your babies. I didn't see trespassers when I found you here. I saw my mother, fighting impossible odds with nothing but love and determination. Maybe we both needed to be reminded what really matters. Emma, who had been listening with intense concentration, suddenly threw her small arms around Marcus's neck. Does this mean we get to stay? Forever? Forever, Marcus confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. Tyler pressed his stuffed elephant into Marcus's hands. You can have Mr. Snuggles sometimes. For when you're lonely, sharing makes everything better. As Sarah wept tears of relief and joy, as the children danced through the halls that would finally know laughter again, Marcus Wellington realized that he'd spent 15 years running from this house because it reminded him of everything he'd lost. But sometimes the greatest fortune comes not from what we build, but from what we choose to give away and who we choose to let into the empty spaces of our hearts. 3 months later, the Grace Wellington Center opened its doors to its first families. Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, her children beside her, greeting each arrival with the understanding of someone who had walked that desperate path herself. And Marcus, who'd once measured his worth in quarterly earnings and stock prices, found himself stopping by every evening, not to check on his investment, but to have dinner with the family that had taught him the difference between being rich and being wealthy. The mansion was never empty again, and neither was Marcus Wellington's heart.